Okay, Halloween is just around the corner and it's time for another Halloween group build. And this time I'm going to be doing the creature over here. But I want to explain about the group build. This is being hosted by Russell Model Cars. For those of you who have been watching my videos, you'll see that I did do a Halloween group build for Russell Model Cars last year, but I really was short on time, and I basically made a really quick build of a little minion figure that I had, and it was a short video. It's only 5 minutes long, and unfortunately not too many people are watching that video, probably because it's a minion and it's only 5 minutes long. But I really do encourage you to go back and watch my minion build, because I did a few special things in that video, and Benny Hill enthusiasts in particular will appreciate that video. But this year it's going to be the creature. Now, a little bit background on the creature for those who are not familiar. Again, this was one of the Universal monsters from the the early days, black and white movies, and originally Universal came out with a few monster movies, in particular Frankenstein, Dracula, and the Mummy in the early 30s, and they were blockbusters. They basically saved the studio at one point. And from that point on, Universal was, the studio that created horror movies and monsters in particular. So this one, the creature, after those first three, they came back and did the Invisible Man and then the Wolf Man, and then finally in 1954, the creature from the Black Lagoon. Now, this was an Aurora kit originally. This is an Atlantis Models repop of that. And they don't even say the creature from the Black Lagoon. They just say the creature. I don't know why, but basically that is that same kit. And again, this was one of the first movies that was actually in 3D, believe it or not. The first two movies were actually in 3D, although that was limited release. And it was, the three creature movies was the creature from the Black Lagoon, followed by the Revenge of the Creature, and then the creature walks among us. And that was kind of a hybrid, because the creature is half human, half creature. So definitely the weakest one of the lot, but I do highly encourage you to watch the original Creature from the Black Lagoon. It really is a classic. And even as a kid, I read about and see pictures of the Creature from the Black Lagoon in magazines and things like that, and I always knew about him. But when I was a kid, all I can get my hands on was a kid. All I can do is get my hands on the kit itself. So I built this as a kid. So it's a lot of sentimental value for me in rebuilding this one. And in particular, there was something about that kit that I'll explain a little later on, which really bugged me. And now, 50 years later, I'll be able to correct that flaw, or what I consider to be one flaw of this kit. And it's again, this is a simple kit. There's not much you can do in terms of making, a giant diorama and things like that. So I'm going to be pretty much building it as is, stock over here. So let me open it up, and we'll see what's inside. I'm going to cut this part out. So just like it was when I was a kid, all the parts are in green. It's a very, very simple base. These are the other kits, some of them I mentioned here. You'll see I built that one, and I have this in my stash, and hopefully I can get the rest. So again, very simple base, creature figure, in various parts. This giant lizard over here, a small little tree with a little snake, and that's pretty much it, really. Now, the issue I have is this shape, the way they shape the head, where they have extra gills, and I don't know if it's corrected in this kit. I don't think so. I think it's actually from the original molds. But I'm not going to explain all that detail. I'll do that in my next segment, because I got to get started building it. Okay, I figure since I've just taken all the parts out of the box there and spread them out, I might as well explain exactly what it was that it's been bugging me for so long, and what I'm gonna change on this kit. And as you can see over here, the head is very simple. This piece, that piece, that piece. So basically you put that there, this goes there. There's no other way to fit that in there. And then this goes here. There's a pin mark that says this goes here. Now you can see the problem is this giant ridge right on top of his head. And closed over here, and that is just wrong. People have said that that's part of, the fins on the creature and, the gills, if you want to call it that. But if you look in the movie, he does have something like this, but it's very, very small. It's not as nearly as pronounced, and it's really more kind of like in the back of the head. So you should not really see that giant ridge looking at him, head on, face for, face right, straight on. So that bugged the Jesus out of me as a kid building this model, saying, am I doing it wrong? Am I doing it wrong? But there's really no other way. And I remember even then I debated, should I, sand that down? But I wasn't very adventurous back then. And, I said, model kit says you glue it that way, and that's how I built it. But it always bugged me. And again, this time I'm fixing that problem there. On with the build. So the parts are all off the sprue except for, the tongue over here on the lizard, and I've been working on it. A lot of filing and cleaning up. There's some parts that really do need a lot of, have a lot of flash and things like that. But what I really want to talk about right now is texture. And I think I mentioned before in the past, at least on some other videos, where I hate it when you have to sand down a seam line and then you lose the texture. And in this case, the reptilian skin over here, although it does change from some places from these little bumps and things like that to more flatter areas. Anyhow, I was thinking a lot about how I can, retain or get back some of that texture. And in this case, what I did was after puttying, everything to the best of my ability with regular putty over here, I said I think I can get back that texture with that little lumpy stuff. I don't know if you can see that in there. By taking epoxy, 5-minute epoxy, mixing really, really small batches, and then just using really the tip of a toothpick to go in there and just do little dabs, little droplets, if you want to call it that. Making sure that they're very, very small, it won't spread out too much. It won't, touch one another, the ones beside it, and just letting it dry. And then afterwards, what I've done is, or will be doing, is sanding it down, because again, this is more like flat little, humps on the skin over here. And I did a little test somewhere over here. I can't remember which arm it was. And I can sand this down very, very lightly. And it comes out not perfect, but very close to what it was before. And more importantly, you won't see an ugly seam line down the sides or on his arms and things like that. So a little more work to be done there, but it seems to be working. I'll try to take a before and after picture, especially after I sand it down. And you can actually go back and do another layer, but make very, very small batches with, I was just using this 5-minute, dollar store epoxy. And the reason is, when you put the droplets, as soon as this stuff starts drying, when you pull back, you'll see a little string of epoxy, and you don't want that because it'll fall over onto the other side. So makes very, very small batches. Apply as many droplets. I can basically do, one side of a leg over here with just basically a drop of this stuff. And then I go make a fresh batch to do the other parts. And then, dry one side, then do the other side. So I want to mention that, and hopefully I'll get that texture back. The only other thing I want to say is what I've done here over here for the tongue, because it's going to be hidden behind here, and I really have to build it up beforehand, is I've painted it, and then what I think I'll be doing is either putting a piece of wax paper or something so that I can later pull it out of his mouth and, not lose anything as I'm painting the face afterwards. So the next big job is, of course, addressing this huge, huge ridge, which is, terrible, ugly. And the problem there is you can see that when the parts fit, it's right at the edge of that ridge. So once I'm doing some sanding or putting to fill it out, I'll have to be careful to make sure that's all covered in. I might leave a small ridge, but honestly, I don't think I will. I think I'm going to try to do my best to try to just sand that completely off, do something in the back to make that, come back in line with, the skull cap over here. And hopefully I can fix that one nagging problem that I hate about this kit. The last thing I want to say is, again, you can get, the movie itself. You can get DVD sets. There's plenty going around. But this is actually a very good, the Legacy collection from all the Universal monsters. There's 6 in the set. I've got them all. And these are actually very, very good DVDs, not Blu-rays. They later came out with a Blu-ray set. But I just want to say this Legacy collection is very fine, crisp, clear transfers for all the movies. And when it comes to The Creature, there's actually a novelization, and this is actually a very rare book. If you ever do see it, pick it up because it's highly collectible. There's only a few books in this series, Creature being one of them. I'm not sure if even the other ones, I think there's a Mummy. I may have one or two on my shelf, but if you ever see this one, it's highly collectible. And again, it's one way of reading about the story, and it's got some pictures in there too. So the build continues. Okay, so the pieces are starting to come together, as you can see over here. I want to mention a few things for this build in particular. One thing I noticed was that when you're putting his legs into his feet, there's a large gap. Now you can, if it's in the center, you'll have a gap in the front and the back, or you can have him lean all the way forward, which puts this huge gap in the back, which is what I opted to do. And to make sure, because that was the case for both feet, I want to make sure it was going to fit in the stand. So as I glued it with a little bit of glue to begin with, in the position I wanted, which was basically all the way forward, I let that settle and, dry up for enough of a fit to hold it. But then again, I had to be very careful because I had this large gap. Now, instead of using putty for that, I really wanted it to be solid. So again, I did the the DIY sprue goo to fill that in, and it becomes like very, very solid. It's the one thing I want to mention. Like a lot of times, it calls for different types of putties. There's stronger putties, weaker putties. Some are more water-based, so soluble, so they're easier to work with. But sometimes, sprue goo does the job because it's not just a putty or a filler. It's also a bond, a good strong bond. And I had to do that also. There was a missing part of the lizard's lip over here. So I did the same thing there. Put a little sprue goo, let it dry, sand it to the shape I want, and then had to go in a second time. But again, it's very, very solid. Now, what I really want to talk about is the progress on the head. As you can see, now it's glued together, and I've started doing that shaping. I've done a lot of filing on top. But in order to do that, first of all, I mentioned that I wanted to have that wax in there so that when I spray paint, I don't, cover back the painted tongue. And what I realized not only was could I get that piece of wax out with some tweezers over here, but I realized if I'm making it long enough, it's in the back there, and I could just really pull that out. I did a trial for that, and it works fine. So with that in place, one thing I did before I glued this in over here was, again, because it's where it meets, there's really nothing underneath. So what I did is in the back half over here, I put a lot of sprue goo again to build up some structure so that I had to have something more solid after I glue it and I do some putting, or in this case, again, more sprue goo. I did a round of sanding over here and then started filling in that gap. But more importantly, I didn't want to lose the texture from the back of the head, that fin, as I'm filing that down. So I made sure that I tried to get a line with that and try to get some of those grooves back in there. If you can see that here, you see there? So I got those grooves back in. And so that as I'm filing this down, I won't lose, that place that those grooves are there. And every now and then I'll just say, okay, if I have to make them deeper, gouge them out again. So again, a little more work to be done over here. You can see the front profile. It still shows a bit that ridge, that fin ridge, or whatever you want to call it. But getting close to it, if you look at the side profile, it's not too bad already. So, like I said, we're almost to the point where we can put everything together and start giving it a priming. Okay, things are progressing over here, but I want to mention a few things at this point. As you can see, I've started priming some of the parts, not the creature itself. And one little surprise, well, caught me by surprise anyhow, was actually this logo over here, an imprint. And then if you can focus in on there, it says Revell. 1994. This was both surprising and not surprising. The reason why this is Revell is because and people who build models know that there's always a complicated relationship between a lot of the companies and the history of the companies. Basically, molds being loaned, companies being sold out, taken over by others, where they keep the name of the company going and things like that. So at first I was surprised that it was Revell, but because I know that this kit is also sold under the Monogram, or at one point was sold under the Monogram label. And those are the three big companies, like the Aurora Original, Revell, and Monogram. And again, at one point, Revell Monogram bought Revell, but they were still keeping the Revell name as Revell Monogram and things like that. So anyhow, I'm not too sure exactly why at this point you never saw a box labeled Revell, at least to my knowledge, for the creature. But this was probably from the Revell Monogram merger, where Monogram molds, which they had acquired from Aurora, were now under the Revell name. Anyhow, if you want to see, hear the history of it all, Max's model has done a tremendous job on the history of many of the major, most of the major model companies, and I'll put a link in there, one that he actually had titled Aurora, Revell, and Monogram, and it's a longer video, but for those who are interested in such things, I do recommend listening to it and seeing how all that came about, and you'll explain a bit how that came about over there. Anyhow, I didn't notice this one prior to priming that, so I'll be sanding that down. But now let's talk about the creature itself. One thing I want to mention, again, I've still worked a little more work on the head. You can see it's a little flatter now, and I think I'm done with that. But I want to mention about this thing where you pick off that wax piece. That's only going to work, obviously, if you paint it without putting the head on the creature itself. If not, I could still pull it out there. But I'm going to keep them separate because there isn't a bad seam line between the two. I do need to fix a few things still. I mean, it's minor touch-ups here and there, but I want to talk about some of the, the top of the torso with the legs over here. You can see that this part wasn't clear, but, I was able to putty that up, and I'm probably going to do a little bit more there. But when you align them like that, there's this very distinct overlap over here on this side. Now, I noticed some other people who built the model, it seems to be a little less pronounced. What I'm going to try is with my heat gun going in there and pressing that just a little bit. You can see there's a little gap in there, and I think I can close it. It's always, something that I worry about using the heat gun, because you can ruin things if it gets too hot and melting it, and you never know what the reaction is going to be. But I'm going to try it on a low setting a little bit. If I see it's working, then I'll try to blend that in a little bit more. And after that, it's about, all about the paint jobs. Now, people who've built this model have done a lot with this lizard. Sometimes it's green, sometimes it's orange, red, sometimes a blend between them. Kind of blue-green type of a thing. So I'm not too sure what color I'm going to do it, but I do want it to be distinct from the creature, which is basically always green, although it's different shades of green. So it won't be green. I'll still figure out what I want to do with that one. And again, the creature's green. This tends to be a yellowish tinge, sometimes very pronounced, sometimes not as much. So when I do the painting, either I'm going to put some white first so that yellow can pop out, or I'm just going to use some white primer. I believe I still have some there. And again, it's just a matter of figuring out what type of greens I want. And again, the greens will be different colors, one a base color, and then going in a little lighter and a little lighter and a little lighter, and sometimes maybe little browns and yellows even over the top of all of this. But so far, aside from the small things that I still need to repair, the kit's coming along nicely, and I'm very happy with it. Well, one other thing I want to mention was over here. So again, this creature goes up on top of here, but that this whole cave, if you want to call it that, I was thinking of putting some dangling like vine like things. Like you can see in the mold itself, there's like kind of mosses and kind of growth, green growth over there, also in the back over here. But I was thinking of actually having something like, hanging down a bit like a vine. So I don't know if I'll use like either stems from leaves that I, glue some stuff onto, or stuff like this, just, painted green to have that actually hanging down and dripping wet if I can. So that's the plan. So my experiment with the heat gun was successful. I was able to tuck in that little flap and close the gap over there. So really happy with that. And again, I started priming it. And this is Stylin Res Olive Green, which is actually, pretty much the color I wanted, or the base color I wanted for the creature. So I'm not too sure what I should do now. Should I try to paint it with another paint? Or if I can just leave this as a primer and get the washes and dry brushing to get the full effect of what I wanted over here. I'll have to see about that. I'm gonna give it maybe a little try on the back somewhere, do a little experimentation. But the reason you have this creature over here on the table is because I want to talk about the creature itself and basically the design of the creature. And for years, I mean, the movie credits lists Bud Westmore as the creature designer or special effects or whatever. But over the years, the true story came out that this was actually designed by a woman named Millicent Patrick, who was uncredited for all her work, and this was completely her design, and I believe she built it all and everything, and she's recognized for that now. And she also did a few other things in Hollywood, namely she was the designer of the mask for The Mole People, another favorite movie of mine, although the movie itself isn't really that great. It's really the creature design. And she also had a part in, I'm not too sure how big a part, in the design of the Metaluna mutant in This Island Earth. It's another, sci-fi classic, especially for, that creature in the movie. Last thing I wanted to say about the movie itself was the creature was played. They use different actors for the underwater scenes and the above water scenes, the dry scenes on land, and for all the underwater scenes for all of the three movies, a stuntman slash swimmer slash actor named Riku Browning, he played the part of the creature underwater for all those three films. And that's part of the success of the film, because if you notice, there's really a whole bunch of long scenes where he's swimming for a fairly long length of time underwater without any masks or breathing apparatus and stuff like that. And that really makes this creature come to life, and it looks real because of him. And apparently he was able to hold his breath quite well, and he was a swimmer, which is how he got the part in the first place. So that's what I want to say about that. And one other surprise in the Revenge of the Creature, the second film, was that there was a young Clint Eastwood in there for a fairly small part, but that was one of his Hollywood beginnings. As you can see, I've also done a few things with the base, really touched up just a few colors here and there. And I went back and reprimed the snake white because I've decided that I wanted to, give it a paint scheme that makes it stand out. So I decided to paint this as a Honduran milk snake. So it's got a little bit of white in it, and, some different lines and things like that, some reds and blacks. So I'm going to do that. And I snipped off his tongue because honestly, the one in the kit, it looks more like he was smoking a cigarette. So cigarettes are bad, so I snipped that off. I don't know if I'm going to put another tongue, to be honest. I could probably leave it as is, but that's it for now. So this really looks like a Honduran milk snake to me, and really happy how that came out. And few things I gotta still do over here is actually give him a tongue. And I just want to give you a size comparison. This is the tongue for the lizard, and this is the snake, so much, much smaller. And again, I chopped off the tongue that he had, but I created this, which is microscopic tongue. It's actually got it's a fork tongue, if you can see that. I don't know. And still needs painting. And the way I created that was I took this, stretch sprue that I had, from other things I want to do with stretch sprue, and I just whacked it with a hammer on kind of an anvil type of thing, which made it really, really flat. I split it in two, and then I took one of those halves and I split the tip to make the forked tongue over here. So it's looking good. And as you can see, I've done the painting. I decided to keep that the primer as the base. And what I did is I did a clear coat to protect it all and seal it. And then I went to give it this accent over here, this wash, but only in select places, get basically where his gaps are. And what I did for that is rather than using acrylic paints, I actually use oil in mineral spirits or white spirits, and mix that up and use that to get into those creases. And I like the effect. Again, it's pretty much what I wanted. Some places a little darker, some a little lighter. I might go a few more touch-ups here and there, but in general, I really do like it. But now I've got to still, add higher, lighter color accents. Whether I use a slightly lighter green, or some people use yellow and things like that. I still got to figure that out. But so far, it's looking good for the creature himself. And you can see over here, there's the head, and again, the same thing. And I got to figure out what to do with the eyes. Again, there's so many variations. Again, this is a problem with a creature that is basically a black and white movie. You have to kind of use your imagination to see what colors he really looks like. My biggest problem right now is what to do with this guy over here, because I don't like, I don't want him. I didn't want him to have him green, because I want him to be quite separate from this. I looked at some, kind of bluish tinges, wasn't crazy about some mustards, but then again, that's basically back to this guy's belly. So I really don't know what to do with this guy, and I've got to figure it out soon, because we're coming to the end over here, or at least the bigger pieces. And that's what I've got to figure out. The only other thing over here I've done on the base, started with the rocks and things like that, and as I put some of that same wash around just the creature title, because I want to go over that with some light colors so that the word the creature pops out. But again, there's still a lot to go over here. I'll put pebbles and sand and things like that, and different streaks of colors, and more washes over here. And the same thing over here. I tried to keep this all dark so that it's in the back, but I've got a lot of work to do with the greens and the mosses, and see what I want to hang there in terms of actual plants, which I think I mentioned before earlier on. So still a few things to figure out. Okay, as you can see, I've done a little bit more on the base over here. I ended up painting the lizard this way, just because I tried different colors and things like that, and I was really never happy, and it ended up just playing around. I ended up with this color, which again, it's a dark green, which makes a lot of this model greens and different tones of greens. So kind of unfortunate, but again, I really don't like the other colors anyhow, so I think I'm just going to stick with that. Did a little different shades of green on the mosses and things like that, and as you can see here, I painted the creature logo, the creature name here in green. But again, too much green, so I'm going to go back and either use yellows or reds, or a combination thereof down here. Repaint that. And I managed to glue in his tongue, but one thing I would suggest if you're building this model is to put something in the bottom half of his mouth over here, so that there's a little more to glue that tongue in. Right now, it's just glued onto the lip, because again, at the end of the tongue, it's floating in air. So something you give a thought to if you're building this model. I've also glued the small, miniature tongue on the snake over here, looking good. And I've done a lot of work with the creature itself, where, washes and dry brushes, and it looks, I think, great. got all the detail that I want to pop out. I didn't overdo it to say, you know, it's too green or, you know, yellows and things like that. And I think it's a really, really nice, realistic look to it. Now, the problem I have with the creature over here is originally, you know, seeing as he's coming out of water, or that was, you know, you would normally think he's coming out of water, that I was going to give this a really good gloss coat, future or something. But I'm reconsidering that because I think I would lose a lot of detail if I have it too shiny. So I think what I'm going to do here is go and give him a semi-gloss coat, and I'll try that first. And again, you can see I did a lot of work on the belly over here with different browns and yellows and things like that. And you know, I really, really like how the creature itself came up. And then the last thing we're going to have to do is put the tree there, put the arm, and then work with some mosses around the base of that cave, or different areas on the cave itself. And I've actually, you know, ages ago I bought, you know, dollar store mosses, and I'm going to be using a few of those in there. And then lastly, I'm going to try to get that, you know, dripping effect of on some of the mosses. So that'll probably be glossy, like, you know, wet seaweed type of a thing. So a few more things to go. Okay, this creature is done and ready to go back into his lagoon. Really happy the way it turned out. Pretty much the way I wanted to build him. Again, my worries were always, you know, getting that texture right and the colors right. And I pretty much achieved what I wanted to. I gave it that, you know, semi-gloss, a shot of semi-gloss over his body. It's a little bit better. I wish there was just a little bit more gloss, so I might give it another shot later. But even as it is right now, I'm very happy with the kit. So you can see I add a lot of, like, I guess you can call it, you know, lagoon debris, those little branches and twigs and things like that. And what I did with those is the greenery, the one that looked more like weeds, seaweeds and things like that. I went back and put some future on it to make those shine. Not crazy the way, you know, I've done the back over here, where I tried to stick wherever I had this, you know, fake moss, some, you know, kind of real moss. I might do a little touch up there, but I do like the way that some of those hang in the back there, and things like that. I also bought some of those, you know, prefabbed little clusters of grass, and, you know, split one in two and just added one on each side over there. It was my first time using that stuff. It's not too bad. A little small for the scale here, but again, I just really want to try it out. I like the way I could position the snake so that he's kind of like facing forward over here. He looks great. And again, I went back in with this and made the creature logo red and put some future on that, so that really pops out a bit more. So again, for me, this was a nostalgic kit, but it really is a great kit. And as you can see, if you take your time, you can make a really, really nice looking creature. And that's what I did, and very happy with it. Still got a few monsters, Aurora monsters in the stash there, and still some I'm looking for, or will eventually get someday. And again, they're always popping out new monsters these days from the other new companies, where they, you know, there are other creature kits and things like that. So hopefully there'll be another creature in my future, and hopefully you enjoy the video over here. So like and subscribe if you haven't.